Thank you. You may be seated. I want to welcome you to the north of the island. One of the beautiful parts of Barbados. I can't say the most beautiful, because then I'll be like, down my parish. I'm Arlie Connolly, your MC for this morning's proceedings, and I just want you to relax and enjoy the nice cool breeze. It's a nice, cool, windy day. All right, so we're going to enjoy ourselves, and we're going to learn some things today. Okay? As I said, this is the launch for the Pesticide Container Management Scheme at Spring Hall Land Lease Project. And coming to do the opening remarks is the Chief Agricultural Officer, Ms. Keely Holder. Put your hands together for her, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yes. I'd like to welcome all of you, farmers especially, to the launch for this pesticide container management program that we have. I'm happy to be in the north again. I don't get here as often as I used to. And I'm really pleased to see the turnout of farmers. I wanted to talk a little bit this morning about pesticides, because there are many misconceptions related to pesticides. And the word pesticide is misunderstood, nearly to the same extent as the word chemical. And we've been led to believe that pesticides are unnatural, dangerous, and do not belong in the food supply. But this really defies a basic understanding of biology. A pesticide really is any chemical, natural or human-made, that is designed to kill another organism. And so the first thing that we need to understand is that pesticides are not a human invention. In fact, plants and other microorganisms have used chemicals to defend themselves from other organisms for hundreds of thousands of years, actually from the beginning of time. So in truth and in fact, biological warfare was invented and perfected by Mother Nature. But what have we done as humans? We've figured out how nature uses pesticides, and we've manipulated them to maximize on our yield by having more tools in our toolbox. And that's what really pesticides are. They're an important tool in every farmer's toolbox. And by farming, we're talking about growing food on a commercial level and doing it as a profession. And that means that we're producing large stands of crops, and the impact of that is that also gives rise to even larger populations of pests then that we have to deal with, which is not something that we would see happening at a household level where you're growing on a very small level. So one of the things that we see, for example, is antibiotics. Where do antibiotics come from? These are actually compounds that are produced by a bacteria or a fungus to kill another organism. We don't call these antibiotic pesticides, but that's exactly what they are. But we understand that there's an important use of antibiotics, and we also understand that overusing antibiotics or not using them in the correct way can lead now to problems that we're seeing within our health and wellness system. So to a bacterial cell, a microbe is just a different species, and it's often nothing more than a competitive pest that should die. So the bacteria will produce a chemical with the intention of killing it. That's what a pesticide is. And plants actually do the same thing. From a plant's point of view, many insects are nothing more than dangerous leaf-eating parasites that should die. So plants will produce their own insecticides. And things that we use in our daily lives, like caffeine. Caffeine is actually an insecticide that is produced by plants, and so too is nicotine. And these are produced to actually keep the insects from eating and destroying the plants. And we see the same thing with weeds and other plants. So take, for example, sugarcane. One of the reasons that you've always seen less weeds in the field after you grow sugarcane is that sugarcane is what we call allelopathic. So they actually produce some kind of compound that will stop other weeds from growing. And so we see all the time that there's always been pesticides in nature being produced naturally by plants. And in fact, it's been found that 99.99% of pesticides that we consume in our diets are produced by plants themselves. So every plant produces roughly a few dozen toxins, some of which at a high enough dose would be toxic to humans. Cabbage, for example, produces at least 49 known pesticides. So the thing about pesticides is understanding that they're part of our ecosystem. They're part and parcel of the life that we live, but we now as humans have been using them in a way that requires us to judiciously use and manage them. And the first aspect of judiciously using and managing pesticides is understanding that healthy plants are like healthy humans. The same way that if you are healthy and you eat a healthy diet, you're less likely to get sick and require antibiotics. The same thing for plants. When plants are given a healthy diet, healthy source of nutrients, then they're less likely to get sick, they're less likely to be susceptible to pests and disease, and so they're less likely to require pesticides to do that. And so, you know, this is all part of the movement that we want to see, where we understand that these are the things that are critical when we talk about the judicious use of pesticides. And the other thing that I want to mention is the fact that, you know, the same way that if we take one Panadol, for example, it would be beneficial for a headache or for back pain, and if we take an entire bottle, then that would be an overdose. It's the same thing. So another key message that we want to focus on is that the dose actually makes the poison. So water, caffeine, or just about any chemical can be deadly if you ingest too much of it too quickly. So how do we limit risks when using pesticides? We want to limit the toxicity and or the exposure. And this is where the pesticide container management program comes in, because this is one way when we triple rinse, we are limiting the toxicity and exposure to these pesticides to our health. This is also where integrated pest management comes in, which is the effective and environmentally sensitive approach to pest management that relies on a combination of common sense practices, really and truly. It uses current and comprehensive information on the life cycle of pests and their interaction with the environment. So what does this mean? You pay attention, you understand when you see certain types of pests, you understand how they are growing on your crops, and of course, many of you have been farming for 20, 30, 40 years, and there are things that you will know inherently about pests, and you, because you understand it, you know when is actually the best time to apply particular pesticides. And even when there are times that you don't need to apply a pesticide even though you see a pest. So a classic example is something like tomatoes. Yes, we will see leaf miner on tomatoes very early in the young stages, but they don't cause significant damage that you need to apply a pesticide to it. So not every pest that you see requires to die, because they may not be causing any economic damage or harm that is significant to your crop. So this is all part of what IPM is about. It's common sense practices, and it's also about making sure that you are keeping more money in your pocket, because pesticides have a cost. They have a time cost in terms of application. They also have a cost in terms of how much money you're spending. So when you use these things more judiciously, you see a return on your investment as a farmer, and that's key and critical for what it is that you want to do. There are also other ways that you can approach minimizing your use of pesticides by using varieties that are resistant to the pest or to the disease. Also by paying attention to when you're spraying. So for example, when you're spraying at more than about 15 miles per hour winds, you're going to get a huge amount of wind drift. So having information as to wind speeds, having information or more access to the right varieties, using technology such as mulch, which will reduce the amount of weeds that you have. These are all ways that you can reduce your use of pesticides and at the same time maximize your output and your profits. So I'd just like to thank you all very much and welcome you to the Pesticide Container Management Program, and I look forward to seeing us making sure that we triple rinse and put our pesticide containers in the right places so that we don't end up with damaging our environment and damaging the life of our ecosystem. Thank you.
We we have some special people here with us. I have not forgotten them. Didn't have a forgotten protocol. We have the parliamentary representative for St. Lucie, Honorable Colin Jordan, and we also have St. Peter. I'm actually looking at Peter's name. I'm actually at my minister's name. Anyhow, let me get that right. Colin Jordan from the Minister for St. Peter, and Mr. Peter Phillips from St. Lucie. We also have our PS with us, Mr. Michael Wilson, on our DPS. I call her Lady Skeet Morris. All right, but y'all don't have that privilege. That is my privilege. Okay? And then we have some others with us. We're glad to have you here. The next person you're going to hear from is Mr. Guy Mathurin. He is the project coordinator for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and he's going to come and talk to us about the whole thing about pesticides and container use. Give him a hand as he comes, please.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. Honorable Ministers, Peter Phillips in the Ministry of Agriculture, Honorable Colin Jordan, Minister, Mr. PS, Deputy PS, Chief Agricultural Officer or Director of Agriculture, Ms. Holder, farmers, media, invited guests, and everybody, good morning. First of all, I'd like to bring greetings from the Sub-Regional Coordinator of FAO for the Caribbean, Dr. Renata Clark, and also the Plant Protection and Production Officer, Dr. Vigil Lopez. My name, as he mentioned, is Guy Mathurin, and I coordinate within FAO a regional project on pesticides management. It has 5 components, dealing with the disposal of obsolete pesticide stocks and other hazardous waste. It's looking at remediation of pesticide-contaminated soils. It's looking at the management of empty pesticides containers and strengthening the regulatory framework in terms of training inspectors, training farmers, training regulators, and modernizing the laws, the legislation, and the regulations which apply to pesticides life cycle management, and also looking at the promotion and the scaling up of alternatives to highly toxic pesticides. Like Ms. Holder mentioned, they are a tool which can be used, but some of them are very highly hazardous and have been causing problems. And in FAO, we are looking at really, if possible, eliminating or phasing out the use of such highly hazardous pesticides. With respect to this morning, though, we are looking at the management of empty pesticide containers. Why should we manage these containers? Well, first of all, they can contain residues in them which are toxic to both human beings and the environment. And this initiative is taking place in the 11 project countries in the Caribbean. And some countries are more ahead in their implementation. We recommend that we start off with pilots in particular agricultural areas, and we are doing so in Suriname, in Trinidad, in Dominica, Barbados. So Suriname and Barbados are a bit ahead of the game, and we're happy to see that although the pandemic has put a damper on many things in all the countries, that we are progressing in this direction. So, again, why do we triple rinse? Firstly, because the containers can be considered as hazardous waste. The residues are known to harm both human health and environment. They can contaminate the soil water, water bodies, and also food and water which may be stored. Some pesticide containers are very attractive and sturdy, and in some countries people use them to store food and to store water in water scarce areas. What triple rinsing does is it reduces the levels of residue in the containers to a minimum. It is known that if you triple rinse a pesticide container, you can actually reduce the residue levels by up to about 99%. The rinsate from rinsing is usually put into the container, the spray can or the spraying machine, and it is applied along with the rest of the pesticide to the target crop against the target pest or disease. So after triple rinsing, a collection, an empty container management scheme like this one here, which is being launched this morning, it ensures that the containers are disposed of properly. It's recommended that they are either brought to a sanitary landfill in a special cell, or like in some countries like Guadeloupe and Suriname, they can also, and the Dominican Republic, they can also be used and recycled to make things like tiles for soil and also fence posts and other plastic items which are not too frequently in contact with human beings and so on. So, another important thing to know is that a scheme like this would not be successful without the full participation of all of the stakeholders. So that means from the importers, they have a responsibility to make sure that the types of containers they sell, it is easy for the pesticides to be dispensed out of and easy to be triple rinsed. The farmers, when they're using them, when they get to the end of the product, make sure that they triple rinse immediately. Don't let them lie around for months before they triple rinse. Then, of course, we have the collection scheme, the extension officers, the solid waste management authorities, and also the ministry in creating the enabling environment and the regulations to help make the scheme successful. We should just ensure that the containers are decontaminated directly after use, that inappropriate use is prevented. Sometimes after the triple rinsing, we recommend puncturing so that they could never be used to store any liquids or food again. And also, it should be easy for the farmers to return these containers to the scheme. So with that, I think I've said enough for this morning. If we have any questions, you can always get back to me on this. And I'd like to say again that we are delighted that this scheme is actually coming to fruition, and we wish every success, and FAO is here to support. So thank you very much for your attention.
fill up a couple of weeks ago, and we need to sensitize the entire country about this, because it's not just only the triple rinsing, it is the whole environment of the country that will be cleaned up. And as I said at the first one in St. Philip, that those persons who apply for agriculture rebates and we come and find that the farm has all these empty containers on it, we will not be giving you the rebate until you clean it up. Because it means then that you don't even realize that those same empty containers that you have lying around when the rain fall and catching water are going back into the same ground that you want to reap your produce from. So let's do the right thing, okay? Coming up next is a demonstration, a video presentation. So I need to put your eyes onto the screen here. Minister, you might probably need to shift your seat that you can, unless you can see clearly. You can see from there, okay? And over to you, sir.
Demonstrating the triple rinsing technique. This technique is used when you have come to the end of the your pesticide, when you have your last bit of pesticide remaining in the container. You use this technique before you dispose of the empty container. Drain whatever remaining pesticide is in your container, in the pesticides container, add that to your spray mix. That is by no means going to affect the concentration of the recommended on your label, and you know that generally the practice in Barbados is that we tend to want to add a little bit more or much more, so that is not going to affect the treatment. Once that's done, note that she added water, so you quarter fill the empty container with water, place the cover and shake it. You shake it vigorously, trying to get rid of any pesticides that may be caught in any crevices or any corners of the now empty pesticides container. Once that is done, you carefully add that rinse it to your spray mix, emptying out every bit that was rinsed. You will then repeat the step by adding more water to quarter fill the container again. So we add water and repeat the process. This is the second time. Once the water is added, you place the cover back onto the container, and again you shake it vigorously, again attempting to dislodge and remove any pesticides residues that may have been caught in your pesticide container. This process could go on for about 30 seconds, but make sure that it is rinsed properly. Once it has been rinsed, you empty that again to your spray mix, ensuring that all of it is emptied into the spray can. The process is then repeated one last time. The third time, it's a triple rinse technique, adding enough water to quarter fill the empty pesticides container. Now once this water is added, you again carefully replace your cover, and again you vigorously shake your pesticides container, making sure this time that everything definitely is removed from the inside of the pesticide bottle. Once it has been thoroughly and carefully rinsed, you remove your cover and completely add every bit of that final rinse to your spray mix. Your container is now considered as being non-hazardous and can be added to your municipal waste. However, as an added precaution, we recommend that you puncture the empty pesticides container. This is to ensure that it can no longer be used for holding liquids and discourage the use by anyone, especially children. Discourage them from using it as a toy. So you make sure that you put a good hole to damage the container more or less. That container can then be added to special bins that will be placed around the island that we'll tell you more about, or it can be added to your municipal waste. Thank you.
I love the environment, so I want it to be safe. And I want farmers to practice the triple rinse technique. Read, rinse, and return.
Rinse and return. Now, one of the things I want to draw to the farmers' attention that are here, realize that the person in the video, they had their gloves, they had their respirator, and they even had on a hat, and they were wearing long sleeve. I've seen persons putting their hand down in the CP3 container and stirring it. Yeah, I've seen it, which is ridiculously stupid. Right? So let's do the right thing, okay? Let's do the right thing. Coming next to share some remarks with us is the Honorable Colin Jordan, Member of Parliament and Minister of Labour, Social Partnership, Relations and the Third Sector. Here, put your hands together for the Minister, please.
Minister, colleague, and neighbor, and friend, Peter Phillips, Permanent Secretary, who was also my Permanent Secretary for a short time, Mr. Wilson, DPS. I remember Lady, and I got caught right at that point, so I didn't remember the rest. Chief Agricultural Officer, Ms. Holder, who I've known for quite a long time, Mr. Mathering from FAO, officers of the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, media professionals, the really important people here who are the farmers of Barbados. I am going to say it before Minister Phillips gets to say it, welcome to the North. For those of you who are not from the North, welcome to, I don't see the MC, but welcome to the best part of the island. That's just a factual statement. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share a few remarks, just very few brief remarks on this occasion It is, for me as one of the representatives of a northern constituency, a very important exercise. It is important for, I think all of us are aware of government's approach to food provision, food security, and also as it relates to the environment. And when I received the invitation, I thought first not necessarily of farming narrowly, but about the environment as a whole. And the fact that as a country, as a region, and I dare say as a world, we face what is referred to as an existential threat. Because our degradation of the environment has been causing some very significant negative impacts. We've talked a lot, and those of us from the north are very familiar with drought conditions, reduced water levels, and reduced access to potable water by many of the residents, many of our constituents, for those of us who represent constituencies. We are aware of the impact from that perspective. We are also aware of the impact on the environment of less than ideal practices based on the storm activity we have been having. Freak storms. Just a few years ago, storms that go from category 1 or 2 to category 5 in the space of just a few hours. We have heard lots about, and this is further from us, but we hear it in the news, the forest fires in the United States. And now, maybe for the first time in a long time, we're hearing about gigantic forest fires in Europe. We've heard about global warming. And we know that these things are caused by a number of different factors. There is the burning of fossil fuels. That is an significant contributor to the phenomenon that we know as global warming. The impacts are varied. I spoke about droughts. I spoke about increased ferocity and frequency of storm systems. There is also, and I think the Chief Agricultural Officer was speaking a little bit to this earlier, the matter of the reduction of necessary biodiversity, natural ways that plants and human beings have of existing together. Waste disposal is also a part of the contributing factors that impact our environment in very negative ways. Pollution in the air, pollution of our water in the water tables, and we've been hearing about nitrates in the water table. All of these contribute to degrading our environment. And the reason why I'm starting here is because I want us to see, those of us in the north, but generally, to see what may appear to be a very simple exercise, learning how to properly treat hazardous containers or containers that contained hazardous materials. I want us to recognize that that is one contributor, one of a number of contributors to the degradation of our environment. And it is one that farmers, whether commercial farmers or household farmers, have some level of control over. And so we may not be able to do a lot in terms of drought and some of the other larger issues, but we can do our part in relation to contamination of water supply, contamination of soil. We can do our part as it relates to disposal of waste. Disposal of waste is something that we ought to be very concerned about, because as a small island, we depend quite a bit on our fisheries activity. And we know what waste disposal and bad waste disposal does for our marine environment. So there is runoff from the land when pesticides are not properly dealt with, runoff from the land into the sea. But then there's also the issue of containers getting into the marine environment and doing damage. There's also another component that I want to share, and I could not, even though I'm here primarily as the Member of Parliament for a northern constituency, I also have the responsibility for the ministry responsible for labour. And containers that contain hazardous materials and hazardous materials themselves have significant occupational safety and health implications. I wouldn't use language as strong as the language the MC used, but I share the sentiments. Those who have to interact with these chemicals are human beings. And I think we, whether farmers or non-farmers, have a responsibility to ourselves. We have a responsibility to those around us to practice good occupational safety and health habits. Contact with pesticides and other hazardous materials impact people, impact human beings. And even if you as a farmer know what is contained, so in a previous life we talked a lot about MSDS and knowing what is involved and how to treat to any accidents, you also have a responsibility to those around you. And that responsibility will speak to how you deal with the containers. Because while you may be skilled in dealing with the actual chemical, there may be others who come into contact with the containers. And from an occupational safety and health perspective, we know that exposure to these chemical compounds can impact people on their skin. They can impact us in terms of our respiratory systems. They can also impact internally if those substances are ingested. As a social partnership, we adopted quite early in the pandemic experience the slogan, "Safe people doing safe work in a safe country." This exercise this morning reinforces that concept. We want, not just from a public health pandemic perspective, but also from a day-to-day farming perspective, to make sure that people are safe, that they're doing safe work, which means engaging in safe work practices in a safe country. You have a role to play, you as farmers, but also personnel from the Ministry of Agriculture, a role to play in reducing the risk to occupational safety and health impacts, and I refer to adverse impacts. And you have what is being unfolded today, what is being demonstrated this morning, is one of the roles you can play by engaging in the read, rinse, and return program. And the triple rinse component, particularly the triple rinse component of this program. I also want to encourage farmers to, generally speaking, to take safety seriously, safety and health seriously. The Safety and Health at Work Act speaks to either safety committees if you are over a certain size in terms of your number of employees, but it also speaks to safety officers if you don't have enough persons employed that would cause you to have a committee. And the reason why the Act speaks to safety and health committees or safety officers is because somebody around you needs to continue to nudge you about good safety and health practices. When a farmer And my late best friend was a farmer, actually a former employee of the Ministry of Agriculture, Mr. Sandiford. And I know firsthand, because I spent a lot of time on his farm, farmers are passionate about farming. And like most other business people, when they put their heads down, they don't really think about a lot of other things. I want to suggest that you need somebody who will keep you, so to speak, on the straight and narrow. Somebody who will remind you from time to time that you have a responsibility, not just to others actually, but to yourself, to maintain good safety and health practices. I'll conclude by again thanking the ministry for allowing me the opportunity to share a few remarks with you. I want to commend this program, the the National Pesticides Container Management Scheme. I think it is a program, and the phrase read, rinse, and reuse, I think it is a program. It speaks to the potential negative impacts of pesticides. But what I really like about the program is that it is a call to action, a call to do something about it, not just recognizing that there is a potential problem, or there could be potential issues, but we are also, by read, rinse, and return, we are also called to actually do something. And I commend this program, the National Pesticides Container Management Scheme, and its call to action, read, rinse, and return. I commend this to all of you, encouraging you to internalize it, to understand it, to practice it, to live by it, so that our environment can be a safe and healthy one for ourselves, for those who work with us, for those who live with us, and for our country generally. I thank you.
I'm going to give you, add a little piece to that guy that had his hand inside the CP3 container. He died at 35 years old. All because he figured that he could master chemicals with his hand inside the CP3 container. So let's do the right thing, okay? Let's just do the right thing. Coming to share with us now is a former school colleague of mine, same classroom, the Honorable Mr. Peter Phillips, MP for for St. Lucie, and the Minister within the Ministry of Agriculture, Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Master of Ceremonies, the Honorable Colin Jordan, Member of Parliament, my neighbor and my friend, Mr. Michael Wason, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, Ms. Cheryl Morris-Skeet, our Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ms. Keely Holder, Chief Agricultural Officer, Mr. Guy Matherin, Project Coordinator, Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, members of the farming community, other stakeholders, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I must say a very special welcome to all of you, especially those who are here for the first time in this lovely, the most beautiful parish in Barbados, St. Lucie. I'm sure you are enjoying the fresh breeze as you look across the fields resplendent in green. It is truly an honor for me to address all of you this morning at the Spring Hall Land Lease Project, a farming community that can boast of having the largest concentration of land lease farmers in the north of Barbados. Having been established in the 1980s, Spring Hall Land Lease Project now has some 50 farmers on 406 acres of land. I am pleased to be joined, of course, by my colleague, Parliamentary Representative for St. Peter, Mr. Jordan, for we all have an interest in the agricultural development of the northern parishes as we seek to provide employment and ensure availability of fresh, safe, and nutritious fruit and vegetables. Just as important, or even perhaps more so, while recognizing the need to maximize agricultural output with the aid of pesticides, we are here to advocate for the proper disposal of the empty pesticides containers in order to safeguard the health and well-being of our farmers and members of our community. I commend the Food and Agriculture Organization for working with the Pesticides Control Unit of the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security and the Stakeholder Committee for bringing awareness to this potential hazard and developing the pesticide container management scheme to reduce, perhaps eliminate, the risks. The farmers of the Spring Hall Land Lease Project and those of the Land Lease Program at the River Plantation in St. Philip kindly consented to a survey last year that informed the direction of the scheme. It is certainly fitting that these two farming districts were the launching pads for this scheme. I therefore appeal to farmers at Spring Hall to exercise care and responsibility in disposing of the pesticide containers. For if the containers are left lying around in the fields, and you've heard much about that this morning, remnants of the pesticide in its concentrated form can cause contamination of crops or can be easily obtained by persons, especially children, resulting, God forbid, in unintentional poisoning. Farmers, especially to you here at Spring Hall, I am well aware of the challenges you already face in this community with water. And I say that over the past 2 weeks, I've been visiting the area. I visited with some of you already, and this coming Friday I'll be with you again. You recognize that this is an area where there is insufficient irrigation infrastructure to supplement supply in the dry season, resulting at times in critically low water levels. Furthermore, the area is prone to severe flooding in periods of heavy rainfall. I therefore wish to assure you that the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security is actively pursuing construction of 2 water catchment areas with a total capacity of 132 million gallons to capture the surface runoff in the area. One to the east of the main road to Crab Hill, and the other to the south of the Wedge Road to Greenwiches. The relevant study has been completed, and the ministry is awaiting the official final report for consideration. We are confident that the measures being implemented will go a long way, and we give you that commitment, in alleviating the water problems that have been plaguing the farms in this area for far too long. Adherence to the protocols for disposal of the pesticide containers will further minimize any threats to our national food and nutrition security. Ladies and gentlemen, it therefore gives me great pleasure to officially launch the pesticide container and management scheme at the Spring Hall Land Lease Project. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
It's me again. I want to challenge you and encourage you. Not just take this as another session, another time that the ministers come out and talk to you. But I really want to challenge everyone here, because as householders we buy chemicals at times to spray around our house. So I want to challenge you. Make sure you do the right thing, because we have children, we have grandchildren. Make sure that they're stored properly. Make sure that because children are curious, you know, and they will see a container and they might think that the beads or the little piece of rat poison that looks so thing is candy and put it in their mouth. So let's not only think of our own, but think of our children, our grandchildren, and let's be safe and do the right thing. Okay? Coming to give the vote of thanks for you is our... as a matter of fact, before I do that, because we spend a little time down there, I'm going to ask the Chief Agricultural Officer if there's anyone here that might have a query, a question, because they're setting up to give us some snacks, so we still have a little time. If they have a question that she might be able to answer for you, so you're free. Everybody don't get the same time, right? If you have a question you want to ask the Chief Agricultural Officer or the PS, I can put you 2 ministers on the spot too. We are here, and I know that they will not back down. So if you have a question, not a political question, let me get this straight. It must be an agricultural-based question. We ain't talking politics. Okay? Anybody have a query? Yes, sir. We want to hear the question, so come this way that the question can feed into the... Yes. Can feed into the system.
Good morning, all. Minister. Keely, Ms. Holder, I would like you to emphasize the return part, right? As you well know, there are some farmers who have large piles or stockpiles of empty bottles for the last 5 years in their farms. I presume that you will get a 50-gallon plastic bag, three-quarter fill it with the empty bottles, tie it, and then from there, what do you do? That is the problem. What do you do?
I see Miss Osley coming.
Good. Good morning, everybody. I've been told to tell you who I am. My name is Jenny Oxley. I am the Registrar of Pesticides. So yes, I'm the person that you'll be coming to concerning this particular project and anything in relation to pesticides. Please feel free to call the department and ask your questions. Now, to attempt to answer the last person's question, it's a very valid question and an important one. He's asking what next after we have triple rinsed our containers and collected them. We want you to return them to this bin. But the emphasis has to be on triple rinsed. During the morning, you have been hearing about different components of the actual scheme. One of which, Mr. Mathurin, the representative from FAO, he spoke about us actually using the empty containers to make other products. These are products that would not be handled, so it can be used for tiles, for underground cables, buoys in the toilet bowl. Why? Because we want to be part of the recycling effort, not to increase our load at the landfill. So we are looking at options. That's one of the options. Another option is to see if it can be utilized to help generate energy, probably at a cement plant. That's where it's used as well. And there are many other options out there where these empty containers are concerned. So we are at one step of the process here when we ask you to triple rinse, puncture, and return, but it has to be triple rinse. If you do not triple rinse, it means that that one bottle that was not triple rinse contaminates a whole trailer load that we would have collected that would have been triple rinse. That means that if I had a contract with somebody overseas who's willing to take the containers once they were triple rinse, I now have these containers on my hand again and we are back to square one. So we are pleading with you, please join with us in this important exercise. Ensure they're triple rinse, and yes, we are happy to take them back. We are happy for you to return them to the trailer. That's the good. Thank you.
There's another microphone there. We have time for one more. Anybody else? We have time for one more. I was told we have time for one more. Okay. I hope you realize that there is opportunity for manufacturing with these containers. It's an entrepreneurship venture. So if you can find the financial backing, you can take those same containers and you can recycle them and make several different things with them. So the sky is the limit. But as you heard from Ms. Oxley, you have to do the right thing. Make sure that you have triple rinsed them. If you have not triple rinsed them, then we are, as she said, back to square one. Coming to give the vote of thanks now is our PS, Mr. Michael Wason. Can you please put your hands together as he comes, please?
Good morning. Protocol already established. Ladies and gentlemen, my task is simply to thank all the entities and persons who, in some way, contributed to the successful launching of the National Container Management Scheme. Firstly, I wish to thank Ms. Keely Holder, Chief Agriculture Officer, for delivering the opening remarks. On the behalf of the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, and by extension the Government of Barbados, I must extend heartfelt thanks to Mr. Guy Maturin, Program Coordinator, Food and Agriculture Organization, for joining us on this launch and enlightening us on the Triple Range program. I also wish to extend special gratitude to the Honorable Colonel Johnson, Colonel Jordan, Member of Parliament and Minister of Labour, Social Partnership Relations and Third Sector, for taking time out of his busy schedule and graciously consenting to be part of today's proceedings and delivering remarks to us. It would be remiss of me not to thank the Honorable Peter Phillips, Minister in the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, for delivering the Free Address today at today's launch. A number of officials from diverse government departments were instrumental in the successful launch that took place today. In this regard, I must thank those officers from the Labor Department, the Environmental Protection Department, Barbados Agriculture Development and Corporation, who diligently worked with the staff of the Ministry of Agriculture to ensure the launch was successful. I must also compliment the staff of the Ministry for a job well done. Certainly, it would be negligent of me not to acknowledge the significant contribution of our private sector stakeholders in this venture. Special thanks must therefore be extended to Ms. Lee Hill from Carters and Company, Mr. Wayne Springer from Barbados Wells Manufacturing, Ms. Lisa Muster from Massey Distribution, Ms. Daniel Mannings from McBride Carbon Limited, and Ms. Debbie Ryan, Sustainable Barbados Recycle Center. And last but not least, let me thank our MC, Ms. Arlie Conley, for a job well done. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, let me thank you for participating in the launch of the National Container Management Scheme, and I hope you enjoy the remainder of the day. Thank you.
Just a bit of housekeeping. Before we have a few snacks for you, but before we do that, we're going to have a couple photos with the ministers and the chief and the others with the container here, and then we will have our little snacks, okay? And those of you that were there last time, you know the procedure, okay?